Question: how do you define dangerous love? For many of us, we often hear the word love tossed around to and fro here and there really casually, but for a lot of us, love is hard to define. It's hard to quite put our finger on what's happening. And sometimes it can get even harder when we can hear people saying the word love, but we're looking at actions and we're saying, I don't think that that's what love is. I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't have a solid definition for it, but I just know that's not what it is. So as I was looking through, I found a definition for love from Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks says that love is a mixture of various characteristics. She lists those characteristics of love as care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, trust, honesty, and open communication. And when you have love that doesn't include that mixture, you can run into some dangerous situations. So today I want to talk about some observations and some lessons that I took out of the very tragic tale of Tamar that can be found in 2 Samuel chapter 13. So let's jump into the story of Tamar. For clarity, Tamar is the daughter of King David. King David, although he has various children, he has two sons that we're going to talk about today in connection with Tamar. One is his oldest son, Amnon, and then his third oldest son, Absalom. So as we start with this particular narrative, we see that the writer opens up by saying that Amnon was in love with Tamar to the point that it made him sick. And that was the first thing that I noted. I said, well, hold on, stop the music. That sounds like a red flag to me. That doesn't sound like love. It sounds like obsession. It's giving unhinged. It's giving unwell. And we know that for a lot of women, when men become fixated on women to that point where they're sick, to the point where it's now an obsession, that can often be very dangerous for a woman. It normally is going to play out something like a Lifetime movie. It's going to be something traumatic. It's going to be some kind of trauma that's going to be forced onto this woman. And as we continue with the story of Tamar, that's what we're going to find out. And for me, it was really interesting that the author would use the word love. He loved Tamar to this point because it sets up the framework of how we're going to view love, or what in this case was a dangerous love, an obsession, an unhinged desire. So now that takes me into the second point, the second observation. As the story continues, we see that Amnon is met with his advisor, who's also his uncle, also the brother of his father, King David. And so his advisor comes in and he says, hey, what's going on? You're looking sad, you're looking mopey, because Amnon's wandering around, just looking sad, kind of dumpy. And he's like, I really want Tamar, but I can't have her. And his uncle is like, what do you mean you can't? Like, let's devise a plan. Like, I'm gonna help you get it together so you can acquire Tamar. So he tells him, you're gonna play sick, and you're going to have the king come when he comes to visit you to see what's going on with his son. And you're going to say like, oh, Dad, I'm so sick. Cough, cough. I need Tamar to come take care of me. I want her to make food in front of me and then feed it to me. And so as their plan, went off without a hitch, Amnon decides to play sick. King David comes to visit him. And right on cue, Amnon gives his father his desire, and his father commands that his daughter Tamar go to her brother and take care of him in his time of need in this sickness. And so Tamar, being the good daughter that she is, she follows her father's orders, which are also the orders of the king. And he sends her right into Amnon's plan, right into his trap. And so from there, she begins to prepare the food. Amnon begins to execute his plan. He removes everyone else from the room. So it's just he and Tamar, and that's when he begins the attack. And against Tamar's wishes, trying to convince him, trying to use logic, that you don't have to go about this way. You can just talk to the king. There are other ways to do this. Amnon is not listening because, again, what the narrator called love is obsession. It is unhinged. He is unwell, and then he assaults Tamar. And that brings me to the second observation, where we see that when you call something love that it's not, it can lead to hatred. Because shortly following the assault, we see that Amnon now hates Tamar. The word hate is used several times right after we see that the assault has occurred. And he hates her so much that as she's crying and she's trying to put herself together, he is now kicking her out forcefully, requiring that she be dragged out, crying, ripping her gown. She had on a beautiful gown that noted all of the virgin daughters of the king that she is now ripping because she no longer fits into that category. She is now putting ashes on her head. She is now in full mourning. And all you can see is that Amnon has thrown her out and locked himself away. And so when you start to think about the connection between the word love that we saw at first, that has now turned to hate. And we can see how these two very strong and powerful emotions can get mixed up when you don't have a proper definition of love. And how quickly what someone called love is now very clearly a hatred. Because her brother was unwell, because her brother, his desire went unchecked, his very unhealthy desire went unchecked and unchallenged. And so as the story continues to go on, we see that her other brother, Absalom, who is the third brother, he steps into the picture and he comes to collect his sister. And he says, I'm going to put you in my house. We're going to take care of you. Don't worry, just hold on a little bit. And we also see that as news of this tragedy is spreading, we see that her father finds out about it. And all it says is that King David was upset. And that's where his action ends, with an emotion. But we don't see any kind of consequence. We don't see the king and also her father address this very tragic incident that's gone on under his roof with his own children. And finally, we see the third observation in the aftermath of this situation. And we see that unchecked desire just continues the cycle of violence. So as Absalom has come in to take care of and try and protect his sister, and Amnon has gone off to continue living life with the king only being upset, but without issuing any kind of consequence or actually addressing the tragedy that's gone on in his family, in his household. We see that Absalom, the third brother, takes vengeance into his own hand. And we see that he waits 2 years to execute his revenge. But in 2 years' time, he plans out an elaborate scheme that ends with his brother Amnon dead. And we see that causes tragedy to the king. It causes a lot of the other brothers to be fearful for their life as they're trying to figure out what's going on. It will also contribute to eventually Absalom will challenge King David to the throne. It literally, because there is this unchecked desire that has wreaked havoc throughout the household. We see that it just continues the cycle of violence. We see that it just continues to perpetuate the tears and the rips in this family that not only impact Tamar, who was assaulted and had her status taken away from her again at this time, something that was so precious to the women because they didn't have autonomy. All they had was their ability to keep themselves pure, and her brother has taken that away from her. And because her father will not address it, and her uncle has aided and abetted in her assault, it is now on her brother to take it upon himself to try and rectify and find vengeance for his sister. And so we see that when you have situations where you have something that is unhealthy, like this dangerous love that we see that Amnon had for Tamar, it just continues this cycle of violence. It continues the tragedy that continues to go unchecked by anyone with power and authority in this situation. We know that when Amnon came to his uncle should have absolutely stopped that dead in his tracks. He was his advisor that's also talking about his niece. He should have acknowledged how this was so unwell and wasn't going to end well for anyone in the situation. But instead, he continued on with not only with the plan, but he's the one who created the plan. We see that King David came into the mix and should have asked more questions, should have been more aware of what was going on in his household, but he didn't. And he's literally sent his daughter into the lion's den and did not hold anyone accountable for the assault that happened against her. And because of his inaction, now his son has come in to basically murder his brother as a way to avenge his sister. And all of this happened because there was a dangerous love in the king's household that no one decided to address. So as you think about this story, and as you think about what you can take away from this narrative, what you can take away from Tamar and all of the people who surround her in this narrative, what will you do as you've come across the dangerous love in and around your life? How will you challenge it? How will you call it out? How will you address it? I'll leave you with that. Bye.